Welcome to the deep dive. We're your shortcut through all that noise, straight to the insights you need to really stay informed. Honestly, there's just so much out there. It feels like a full-time job trying to keep up. So that's what we do here. We help you make sense of it. Today, we're really digging into Europe's energy transition, specifically that big push for electric mobility, and the looming 2035 deadline for petrol and diesel cars. We've gone through a whole stack of sources. You shared articles, research, expert takes, and our mission today is to unpack some pretty fascinating stuff and sometimes challenging insights, too. The material gives a pretty sharp critique, actually, of certain European strategies and industry attitudes. We're going to lay that all out, focusing especially on this perceived slowness and, what that might actually mean.
Exactly. And we'll explore why, at least according to these analyses, that 2035 deadline isn't just some ambitious target, it's framed as an urgent necessity. And critically, we'll look at the pretty significant risks Europe might be running if it hesitates or tries to dilute these commitments.
Yeah.
Especially when you see other global players really hitting the accelerator.
Yeah, I'm really keen to get into this one. It touches on so much technology, the economy, climate strategy. It's complex, no doubt about it, but wow, the implications are huge for global leadership, for our future. Okay, let's jump in. So let's kick things off with the main point from our sources, this 2035 deadline for electric mobility. The big question seems to be, is this date just too soon for Europe? Is it putting, unfair pressure on industries? Or is it, like many argue, actually a necessary catalyst for change?
Well, the material we looked at is pretty clear on this, actually. It argues pretty strongly that 2035 is not too soon. No. In fact, it's presented as a vital deadline. Absolutely necessary, they say, to properly tackle the climate crisis and also to speed up the market's shift towards electric mobility, really push it. And what's interesting is that this goal, it's already been confirmed at the European level. That's despite, some pretty persistent lobbying from industry to delay or maybe soften it up a bit. So that tells you something, right? There's a recognized need at the policy level.
Okay, so it's not just a random date. It's meant to be a specific kind of pressure. How does that catalyst idea really work, though? How does it actually drive innovation, like the sources suggest? What exactly does it catalyze, and why is that so critical for Europe right now?
Right. Well, it acts as a powerful driver, mainly because it removes the ambiguity, it creates certainty. When you have a firm commitment like 2035 set in stone, it basically forces industries to adapt. They can't just keep delaying. And we're not just talking about, tweaking existing car models. No, this is about fundamentally rethinking product lines, supply chains, the whole setup. And crucially, it gives the market the certainty it needs for these huge investments.
Ah, certainty.
Think about it. Companies deciding whether to build, say, new gigafactories for advanced batteries, or developers planning massive networks of fast chargers, which need big grid upgrades.
Yeah, huge costs.
Exactly. We're talking multi-billion euro decisions, often with really long lead times. They absolutely need a rock-solid policy signal to justify putting that kind of capital down.
No.
Without that certainty, investment just dulls. It stalls. And innovation lags behind. It's that simple.
That need for certainty makes perfect sense, especially for such massive projects. But we've also heard, the other side. Counter-arguments from some industries. They're reportedly asking for more flexibility, maybe some relief, or just longer timelines. I can imagine some listeners thinking, well, isn't there a middle ground? Can't Europe just ease into this a bit more gently? Does it have to be such a hard stop? What do the sources say to those kinds of requests for more flexibility?
Yeah, and this is where the critique in these analyses gets quite sharp, really pointed. They basically suggest that industries asking for these delays are showing a pretty significant lack of vision. That's the phrase used. A lack of vision regarding, well, two things. First, the incredibly fast pace of tech progress in EVs, and second, the urgent, non-negotiable global environmental needs we're facing. The material explicitly warns that these kinds of requests risk, and I quote, replicating strategies of the past where significant innovation opportunities were lost. So it's not just about potentially missing a future trend. It's about failing to see that the fundamental rules of the game, the rules of the industry, are being completely rewritten right now.
Wow. It sounds like some players maybe haven't learned from history. And the sources you mentioned draw this pretty chilling comparison to companies many of us remember as absolute giants, like Motorola and Nokia. What's the lesson there? What's the cautionary tale for Europe in that?
Yeah, that's a really powerful comparison, and it's definitely meant to hit home. The parallel highlights a critical lesson, often a painful one. delaying a major transition, or just failing to adapt to new disruptive technologies.
Yeah.
It means you're exposing yourself to falling seriously behind competitors globally, maybe even becoming obsolete.
Right.
I mean, Motorola had the very first mobile phone, right? Nokia completely dominated the early smartphone market. We all remember that.
Oh, yeah.
But both missed key transitions. Motorola with digital, Nokia with touchscreens, and the whole app ecosystem thing. Why? Because they were arguably too comfortable with their existing, highly profitable ways of doing things.
They couldn't see the shift coming or didn't want to.
Exactly. And the sources connect this directly to what's happening now. They point out that countries like China are, quote, much further ahead in offering affordable and widespread electric cars. And China's lead isn't just about sales figures today, it's about building integrated supply chains, investing massively in battery tech, and really fostering a domestic market that prioritizes getting affordable EVs out there quickly. They learned from the past mistakes of others, perhaps, and just went all in on the shift. So the message is pretty stark: innovate or fall behind. And that fall can be incredibly fast and irreversible.
Wow, that is a stark warning. Are the sources really suggesting that parts of European industry could be on a similar cliff edge, facing potentially irrelevance if they don't adapt fast enough? And what does this mean for Europe's wider economy if these delays were granted or if that 2035 commitment started to wobble?
Absolutely. The analyses paint a picture of a really critical moment, a juncture. And if you connect this to the bigger economic picture, yeah, rowing back on that 2035 deadline would seriously weaken market certainty. That phrase again, certainty for all that huge capital investment that's needed.
The batteries, the charging.
Exactly. We're talking fundamental infrastructure shifts.
Mhm.
Not just more car factories, but those gigafactories for advanced batteries, the high-power charging networks needing grid upgrades, entirely new, resilient supply chains for critical minerals, components, all of it. Any hesitation would inevitably slow the growth of a strategic and innovative sector. That's the fear. And that leads directly to economic losses and a loss of technological leadership for Europe on the world stage.
That sounds serious.
It is. It's a loss not just of car sales, but of high-value R&D, intellectual property, skilled jobs, particularly in those critical future areas like battery innovation and smart energy systems.
Economic losses and loss of technological leadership. Those are incredibly serious warnings. Let's shift focus slightly to a broader critique these sources make. They talk about a kind of strategic myopia within parts of European industry, yes, but maybe even some institutions too. It suggests the whole situation highlights a serious problem of strategic vision and foresight. It almost sounds like they're diagnosing a kind of institutional paralysis, a struggle to move beyond what's always worked.
Precisely. That captures it well. They highlight that it's not just about a fear of new technology itself. It's also the massive, often painful organizational change involved. Retraining a highly specialized workforce, retooling complex supply chains that have been built up over decades.
Yeah, huge inertia there.
Exactly. It's a deeper systemic inertia that the sources really identify as the core of this myopia. And a key example they point to is the reported openness of President von der Leyen to reviewing the 2035 plan with an approach she calls technological neutrality.
Okay, so for anyone not familiar, what exactly does technological neutrality mean here, and why do the sources see that as problematic?
Right. So it's basically the idea that policy shouldn't pick winners. It shouldn't explicitly favor one specific technology, like battery electric vehicles, over potential alternatives like maybe advanced biofuels and combustion engines, or perhaps synthetic e-fuels, or even next-gen hybrids.
Okay, sounds fair on the surface.
Well, yes, it sounds balanced, but the analyses argue this position actually risks undermining the certainty necessary, there's that certainty word, again, to push an intense and rapid ecological transition. It sends a mixed signal to the market, you see. If policy is ambiguous, if there's a chance the goalpost might shift, then companies can rationalize delaying the really hard choices. They might hope for a less disruptive path. But, as the sources really stress, in an era of such rapid global change, there probably isn't a genuinely less disruptive path anymore. Delay itself becomes the disruption.
Right, okay. So the sources lay out a few key reasons for this perceived lack of vision, the strategic oversight. What's the first big one that jumps out?
It's simply urgency. The material really emphasizes that now, heading into 2025, Europe needs real courage and intelligence, frankly, to tackle this ecological transition head on, especially when you look at global competitors like China. They haven't just gained a lead in sales, they've built an entire ecosystem around affordable EVs. They're pushing out models that are accessible to a much wider range of people. So the sources are implicitly asking, what lessons should Europe be taking from China's aggressive market-building approach instead of maybe just viewing it primarily as a threat?
That's a great point. It's not just about what's coming next, but what's happening right now elsewhere. And that leads straight into the second point, doesn't it? This idea of uncertainty being a problem.
Exactly. The sources argue that trying to keep too many doors open, maybe for hybrids, maybe for future internal combustion tech, paradoxically creates more market and investment uncertainty, not less.
How so?
Well, if there's a chance that petrol cars might get a reprieve, or that hybrids will remain viable for longer than expected, it actually discourages rapid updates,
Hmm.
both for producers who might delay investing heavily in a new EV platform, and for consumers who might hold off buying a more expensive new EV if they think the rules might change again next year.
The wait and see approach.
Precisely. And that wait-and-see attitude ultimately benefits no one in the long run. It just slows down the inevitable transition, making it potentially more painful later.
Okay, and what's the third critical reason mentioned for this lack of foresight?
The third reason really centers on accelerating market demand. The market itself is changing fast, and the sources project that fewer and fewer consumers are going to want, or even be able to choose, petrol or diesel cars. And that's not just because of environmental awareness, but also basic economics and local legislation.
Like city emission zones.
Exactly. As more cities implement stricter emission zones and fuel prices remain volatile, the whole economic case for EVs just gets stronger and stronger. Demand will grow for clean vehicles. The sources are clear on that. And, quote, technological innovation is the key to remaining competitive. If Europe isn't ready to meet that growing demand with competitive, appealing electric cars, well, consumers will simply buy them from manufacturers elsewhere.
This really raises a fundamental question, though. If the benefits seem so clear from these analyses and the risks of delay so significant, why the hesitation? It really does sound like short-term discomfort versus long-term survival. That's a classic dilemma for any big established industry, isn't it? Sort of like ripping off a very stubborn band-aid that hurts now, but you know it's essential for healing.
That's a good analogy, yes. The sources portray this reluctance as a myopic strategy. That's the term they keep coming back to. And it's primarily dictated, they argue, by the understandable fear it is understandable of having to fundamentally restructure these huge consolidated production models
Mm,
and these complex value chains that have been incredibly profitable for decades. It's daunting.
yeah, of course.
However, the sources are really emphatic on this point. This restructuring is inevitable, full stop. And crucially, they add, it's actually rewarding for those who anticipate it.
Mm.
The pain of making the change now, they argue, pales in comparison to the future pain of becoming obsolete. Or worse, becoming just a consumer of critical technologies that are developed and manufactured somewhere else.
So the bottom line here isn't just about sticking to a date on a calendar for the sake of it. It's really about securing Europe's future competitiveness, isn't it? Its economic sovereignty, its place in a rapidly changing world.
Absolutely. That's the core message. Confirming 2035 as inderogabile, that Italian word means non-negotiable, essential, that date is seen as paramount, absolutely critical. Only this, the argument goes, provides that courageous push towards true technological innovation and market adaptation. That necessary jolt. Any attempt to slow down the transition, according to these analyses, risks Europe basically losing a fundamental game on the future of mobility and global competitiveness. The stakes for the continent's entire industrial future are just incredibly high. It's framed as a defining strategic decision for the next few decades.
Wow. Okay, that is a lot to digest. So, just to bring it all together, what we've really unpacked today, based on these sources, is the critical importance of seeing that 2035 deadline not as a burden, but as a powerful catalyst for needed innovation. We've heard the clear historical lessons, those warnings against the dangers of delay, thinking about Nokia and Motorola. We've seen the pressing global competitive threat, especially from places like China that have already moved so aggressively. And we've explored this critique of a strategic myopia within parts of Europe, a myopia that risks its future economic leadership. It's a forceful message, really urging Europe to move decisively and, frankly, faster.
Indeed. And maybe the final provocative thought, the takeaway from these analyses, is this. The ultimate question for Europe isn't if the transition to electric mobility will happen. That train has left the station. It's seen as a foregone conclusion. The real questions are who will lead it, who will innovate fastest, and, perhaps most importantly, who is going to reap the enormous economic benefits globally. It's very much presented as a race, and Europe's position in that race is still very much in play. But the strong suggestion is only with bold, unwavering commitment to the path already set out.
So, what stands out to you from this deep dive? What are your thoughts on Europe's path forward in this really critical transition? We always appreciate hearing your perspectives. And make sure you subscribe or follow the deep dive wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss our next exploration into the big issues shaping our world.